The last time we talked, Joseph, I was only a one-time Super Bowl champion. My hand's a little heavier now. I got 2 rings on my finger, so you can now address me as Mr. Two-time Super Bowl champ. My Philadelphia Eagles beat the Chiefs. I believe when we last talked as well, you were picking the Chiefs to win, and that game wasn't even close whatsoever. But football's behind us now. This show airing on parade day, so probably I would assume after the parade, maybe everyone's back at the house recovering. Listen in, and finally, time to fully lock in on college basketball. I feel like I've said it a bunch. I was like, this is the weekend we'll get into college basketball. And football season seemed like just kept on going. And not complaining, but here we are, February 13th, recording this, about a month and 1 week, 5 weeks away from March Madness kicking off. It's here, and we're kind of full-fledged. Like, we're going to talk about, I think, the first game, Tennessee versus Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt's played 24 games. Tennessee's played 25. So if you haven't got into college basketball yet, it's the perfect time to. The best time of year for college basketball, obviously, coming up with March Madness. But Joe, pretty crazy past week. We had 2 really good winners on Saturday. We had Kansas State, outright against Kansas, and Clemson outright against Duke. I think Kansas State was a 3.5-point dog. I believe Clemson closed as like a 6-point dog. So 2 really good winners outright for us that we gave out here on the show as part of our 10 games of the week. We got another good slate on Saturday. After the parade tomorrow, we head down to Sea Isle for Polar Bear Plunge weekend. So I'm sure all these games will be on at the bar, but a nice loaded slate ahead. But welcome back to the show, Joe. How are we? And what are your thoughts on that beatdown on Sunday night?
I mean, I loved it. I said to you a million times, I had money on the Chiefs and I was going to stick with that, but I was very fully rooting for the Eagles to win. Like, we were talking watching that game, and you know how bad the game was in terms of, like, obviously you guys were loving it as Birds fans, but we were having an
Yeah.
argument which game was better, this game or the Broncos Seahawks 43-8 absolute beatdown.
Pretty
We
simple.
obviously, this one was better just because it's fun to see the Chiefs get the crap kicked out of them. It was fun to see them get beaten down. Like, that was great. I'm very happy for you guys. I'm surprised that the city is still standing from what I've been seeing, and the fact that you guys are. I'm praying for you and the fellas doing parade day and then polar plunge weekend down at Sea Isle. That's a heck of a turnaround. Shout out you and Brace as well, getting on FS1. You
Yep.
guys were on TV. That was fantastic. I wish I saw Tubbsy. It's sad now. Whenever I see you on social media, I'm immediately expecting Tubbsy to be walking around with you. But very happy for you guys. Very happy for the Birds. 2 Super Bowls in 7 years. I, I mean, once again, I haven't seen the Jets in the playoffs since I was in the 5th grade. I am now 25. I've gone through middle school, high school, college, and grad school, and I have not seen my team even in the playoffs. So very happy for you guys, though. Enjoy the parade tomorrow. It's going to be fantastic. You guys deserved it. And we can talk about this off air because I can go for hours. I told my friends kind of after the game ended, like, thinking back to the season, like, I think this year's Eagles team is like a top 10 team of all time. I'm not going to go as far as to say number one because I'm going to say top 10 because, people can argue for whoever they want. But my friends were looking at me like I was on drugs. Like, when I said I think they are like a top 10 team all time, I'm like, I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. When you guys were fully healthy, what, you really only lost that Falcons game?
Yep.
Like, you know
Pretty
what I mean?
much.
Like, Jalen Hurts getting hurt in the, Commanders game
AJ
in
didn't even play that
DC.
game.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were a dominant team. Like, looking back, like, you guys were really good. It didn't seem like it. Texting with you guys, you go down 7-0, you're saying season's over. But I mean, it's very exciting to see. I loved seeing Kansas City, get smoked. That was a lot of fun. But now, we are locking in. I started doing all my bracketology stuff on Monday. I saved that to myself as like a little treat. When I'm all depressed that football's over, I go right into the bracketology. I'm looking at everyone's bracketology lists. I'm comparing them. Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm ready to fully dive headfirst. Coyle, like you said, we got 5 weeks till you and I are in Atlantic City for opening day of March Madness.
Yeah, I said, this was a big, celebration week. I was calling it the F it week. Like, I don't care about really anything about this. Gonna enjoy myself at the parade, gonna enjoy myself, Sea Isle, and then come Monday, locking in like a month straight of just grinding, head down until we get to St. Patrick's weekend and then March Madness weekend right after that. But big work month ahead. Going to lock in for sure on everything college hoops and make sure we're ready to go for March Madness. But we'll get into it. The college basketball weekend preview show, Beast Bets, here on Fox Sports The Gambler, where we bring you the 10 best games of the college basketball schedule for the weekend. 3 games actually this weekend, Joe, on Sunday that we'll be getting into. But we start on Saturday. As always, our projections come from Haslametrics. A lot of these spreads won't be out yet by the time that we started recording. They'll be out probably by the time you're listening. But most of these, as I say on every episode, if you go back and look at what Haslametrics projects it at, you could probably, give or take a point to the spread and the total, and they're usually pretty accurate in that regard. So we start on Saturday down in Knoxville, Tennessee, as number 5 Tennessee at 20-5. Host Vandy, who's having a nice year at 17-7, still not a lock for the tournament. But I think that when it's all said and done, they'll be like an 8 or 9 seed. 1 o'clock tip on SEC Network. Haslam projects Tennessee to win this one comfortably, 75-62. So I go Tennessee minus 12.5, over under 136.5. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Vandy team, kind of, not kind of. They're in like a gotta have it spot. I know they have a bunch of big wins at home, but currently sitting at 5-6 in the conference. And Coyle, we've talked about this for years past, when the Big 12 was really good. Like, yeah, they're deep, but it's going to be tough for me. Like, if Vandy finishes the year, like, let's say 7-13 in the SEC, like, it's just weird, like, seeing a team with that bad of a conference record, even though the SEC is stacked, they're very deep, get in. Like, they need to have a lot of convincing wins for like the committee to put them in with, that bad of a conference record. I think they're going to get pumped in this game, to be honest with you. I mean, Tennessee lost on the road to Vandy last time these two teams played. So I'm going Tennessee 78, Vandy 61. I think it is going to be that ugly of a game. I'm going to take the Vols minus 12.5. I'm going to go over 136.5, which I don't love, but once again, for the sake of the show, making a pick, I'll go over. Probably will stay away from the total on Saturday.
Yeah, big number. I think it's going to stay within it. As you touched on, Vandy beat Tennessee the first time around, but Tennessee a much different team at home. You can pretty much say that for any team in college basketball, but specifically the SEC. These home teams have been super dominant this year, except last week when we saw Florida go to Auburn and win. But even going into that game, like Auburn was a 10.5-point favorite. Just goes to show you the respect that these teams get on their home floor. I do think Vandy not playing desperate right now, but they gotta if they're gonna lose this game, like make it competitive. Like don't have a blowout loss on your schedule, on your resume, because as we said, they're not a lock, but they're probably gonna get in. I'd say like a 75% chance, but still, you don't want to play with anything. So I think that they hang around, make this one close enough to cover within that number of 12.5. But I do think Tennessee will get their revenge and win outright. I'll go Tennessee 72-64. So Vandy plus 12.5, under 136.5 there. All right, we go to the Big Ten now. Number 16, Wisconsin, 19-5 at number 7, Purdue, who's 19-6, coming off a loss to Michigan just the other night. Another 1 o'clock tip. This one on CBS. Purdue projected to win 73-70. So we'll go Purdue minus 2.5, over under 142.5.
I am going with Purdue here. Bounce back spot against Wisconsin. Not really going to go in depth with this one. Just keeping it very simple. Bounce back spot at home. You get a big game against the number 16 team in the country, Wisconsin, coming to town. I think Purdue fans are going to bring it. When you're the nationally televised game on CBS, Coy, like we've been beating this over your head with a dead horse if you don't know already. Football is over. Now you're, the main show to start off Saturday. I think these fans are going to bring it. I think Purdue is going to win 75-71. I'll take a minus 2.5. I'm going to go over 142.5 in this one.
I'm going to take Purdue as well. Purdue, even though they lost to Michigan the other night, they're a team I'm starting to buy into a little bit more. At the beginning of the year, I thought that they were a little bit more fraudulent, but as the year's gone on, they've impressed me a little bit more and more. And Joe, we talk about all the time. If you listen to any college basketball show, any college basketball podcast, they're going to say the same thing. Guard play matters. We saw last week Florida going to Auburn. You could probably argue the reason why they won that game was because their guards are just better. Purdue, I think, has the best guard in this game in Braden Smith. A lot of people are saying, like, if it wasn't for Cooper Flagg and Janai Broom, Braden Smith would probably be the national player of the year. That's how good he's been at the point guard spot. I like Purdue to win this one at home, one of the best home court advantages in the country. The spread only being 2.5. I think it'll probably be more so like a 4.5, maybe 5 even. But I do like Purdue to win this one, and if it is 2.5 to cover as well, I'll go 72-68. So Purdue minus 2.5, under 142.5 there. All right, we go out to the Big 12 now. I think other than Alabama-Auburn, this is the game I'm looking forward to the most, or at least just kind of seeing the result. Number 6, Houston at 20-4, travels to number 13, Arizona, 17-7. Arizona have been playing really well, basically ever since that buzzer beater Hail Mary against Iowa State. They've been playing really well, but they trip up the other night on the road against a K-State team that's been surging as well. But these are two teams I kind of have highlighted right now that I think can make deep runs in March. I even placed a future on Houston. I won some decent coin on the Super Bowl, so I put in 2 national championship futures. Houston was one of them, and then we'll talk about my other team in just a little bit. But I really like Arizona as well. I don't think they're a team that could win it all, but make it to the second weekend, I think, for the way that they started out the year, would be a successful year. But they got a big test with Houston coming to town. 2:00 tip on ESPN. Houston projected to win here 71-66. So we'll go Houston minus 4.5, over under 136.5.
Yeah, to me, this game is going to come down to what kind of Caleb Love are we going to get. I mean, he has stretches where he looks like the best player in college basketball, but then he'll have stretches at the same time where it's like, has this kid ever picked up a basketball before? Like, it's just he's very up and down. He's an electric player to watch because when he's on, he is on. And I think if they're going to win this game, they're going to need a massive game out of Caleb Love. I know that's not exactly rocket science, but I am going to go with Arizona here at home, 66-64. I do think it's going to be a low scoring game. We talk about Houston all the time. They like to make it, a UFC match and just, make it a total rock fight. So I think this will be low scoring, but I do think Arizona is going to be able to come out with the win.
I like Arizona too. I really like Houston, as I said, but this is I heard a guy earlier, Julian Edlow from DraftKings. He was on the Daily Ticket actually with Brace, and he was kind of talking about college basketball, and I agree with him so much in this. Like, I feel like college basketball is the biggest spot player. Like, this is just a spot where I like Arizona. It's like you put these two teams on a neutral court, I'll probably take Houston 8 out of 10 times, but a big one for Arizona. Just lost the other night, as I said, to K-State. Got to bounce back. Another team who's dominant at home in Arizona. Would it surprise me if Houston went there and won it all? No. That's the reason why they're a 4.5-point favorite in this matchup. But do I think it's a good spot for Arizona to get a good crowd in that game? Bounce back from a K-State game the other night. Kind of stay in the race there in the Big 12. Yes, I think all those things kind of add up to a potential win here for Arizona. And as I said as well, like Kansas State, I think over the last month, you can make an argument is playing like a top 5 team in the country. They just shot themselves in the foot with such a slow start. So it's not like that was a bad Arizona loss the other night. And they were in it till the end. I just like Arizona in this spot at home to pull off the outright upset. I'm going to go 70-67 plus 4.5. I know we have the over-under set at 136.5. So I do have the over just hitting there. But I do think this is a game as well. Like, if Arizona is going to win, it's going to have to go over. If they get into a dog fight, a defensive matchup against Houston, that's Houston's game. Obviously, they're gonna come out on top in this one. I think Arizona's got to look to push the pace, get some points in transition, in order to win this game and pull off the upset. So I do think as well, if you like Arizona, look at the over, because I think those two things are gonna have to go hand in hand for the Wildcats to win this one. All right, maybe the game of the year in college basketball, the Iron Bowl to the hardwood. Number 1, Auburn at 22-2. At number 2, Alabama 21-3. 4:00 tip on ESPN. Auburn projected here 86-83 according to Haslam. So go Auburn minus 2.5. Over under 169.5. One of the bigger numbers we've had for sure. And Joe, before you give your pick on that game, we talked about the past couple years, and I think it came to fruition and true last year. It was like, the SEC, you look at how deep and how dominant it is this year. Every single game is so tough. In the past, we've put that on the Big 12, and we're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to buy into the Big 12 making a deep run in the tournament just because of how tough every single game is every single night. You look at the Final Four last year: UConn, Purdue, Alabama, NC State. No Big 12 teams even made it, and top to bottom, beginning of the season to end of the season, considered the Big 12 was the best conference in the country this year, by far the SEC. Do you believe that the SEC, with how good and how tough it's been this year, will kind of not help them come tournament time because of how many tough games that they've been in, how battle tested they are, but more so hurt them just because of such a long grueling season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a possibility. But I think the two teams we're about to talk about are kind of like a level above the rest of those teams. Like, would it shock me to see Tennessee get bounced in like, the first weekend? A little bit, but you know what I mean? Like for the person's exercise, like, no, I could see that happening, but I would be shocked if like Auburn or Bama lost in like the Sweet 16. Like I like if you could do a bet right now, because Connecticut's kind of weird with like some of the futures you can take for college basketball. But like if I could do a bet, Auburn or Bama to make the Final Four, it'd probably be crazy, like minus money. But I would take that right now. Like I think you'll definitely get at least one of these teams in. Another team that I could see is Florida, but the rest of the teams, Coil, like I could definitely see, something like Mississippi State getting bounced the first weekend. I could see, I already mentioned Tennessee, but I could see like A&M, Ole Miss, Mizzou, like Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky for years, I know that was kind of Calipari, but like they like notorious lately for getting bounced early. Um, so I could definitely see that, but I think, like I said, we're about to talk about Auburn and Bama. These teams kind of feel like head and shoulders better, especially when they're at their best than the rest of the conference and the country, especially. Excuse me, but I'm gonna go for this game with Bama winning. I'm gonna win by 9 points here. I'm gonna go Bama 93, Auburn 84. I'm gonna take Bama plus 2.5. I'm gonna take over 169.5. I think Bama is going to win the national championship in college basketball. Shout out Mark and Philly. I mean, I totally agree with him 100%. This Bama team is so much fun to watch. And this game being at Coleman Coliseum, because don't worry, you can tell me no matter what the line is, no matter what the spread is, I'm going to take Auburn when they go back later, at the end of the season. But for this game in Coleman, the biggest game, I think I saw it's definitely for football and basketball, but I think for any sport, it's the first time Auburn and Alabama have been number one and number two when playing each other. I mean,
I
this
think
is
I saw
huge.
first time in SEC history in basketball
Yeah,
as
first
well.
time SEC history in basketball. And I saw some tweet, and this might have been like the last time it happened in the regular season, but like the first one versus two since Tennessee played Memphis in like
Really?
'08, which
Wow.
that was like a game day tweet. Maybe that was the last time game day was at a one versus two game. Like I didn't really read into that much, but still, it's been a long time since we have number one, number two. Yeah, it definitely wasn't regular season because I remember Oklahoma, Kansas back when Buddy Hield was there. That was number one versus number two. But and there's probably a couple more I'm forgetting. But this is a huge game. I'm going Bama at home. I don't really, especially if you're going to give me them as a dog, I'm definitely going to hammer them. That's no disrespect to Auburn. I just think Bama's the best team in the country. I think, especially at home, they're going to be really tough to beat. I think Mark Sears, in Connecticut, you can take player props. I'm going to hammer his over in points. I'm going to hammer over says I'm going to hammer his over and everything. I think he's going to have a monster game. And I just think Auburn is going to lose this game on the road at Alabama.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Bama as well. I talked about it a little bit ago, but Houston was a team I placed national title future on, and I also placed one on Alabama. I've been high on them all year. I think when they're at their best, they're the best team in the country. Just their depth, the style, pace of play that they play, their shooting, their scoring, it's just so good and just so fun to watch. By far my favorite college basketball team to watch. And, not even just this Alabama team, but just the way Nate Oates has kind of transformed that Alabama basketball program and what they've become has been an awesome watch. Obviously, Final Four last year, no expectations, should be a national championship this year with the guys that they returned, the pieces that they had in the transfer portal. This is a national title contending team for sure. And I think anything less than a Final Four should probably be considered a failed season. And it goes back to my original point of, the SEC is so deep, so dangerous, so many tough games night after night. You have to wonder if that's going to wear on these teams and harm them come March, if they have to go win 6 in a row, will kind of limit their ability to do that after such a grueling regular season. That's a big picture thing, but it's awesome to see these two teams who are obviously historically football programs dominate in basketball, and Auburn is in need of a bounce back after last weekend's loss. Alabama, I think, looking to protect home court here, obviously, should be a real fun one, but I'm going to go with Alabama as well, 95-90. The home court kind of does it for me there. I think in college basketball, home court advantage matters more than any other sport. And I also love the over 169.5. I don't care how high it is. This is a game where I'm going to be betting the over, a system play for sure. It'll be on in every bar, probably in the country on Saturday. But I'm going to go Alabama 95, Auburn 90. So Bama plus 2.5, over 169.5. All right, we stay in the SEC now. We go to the Egg Bowl, a little rivalry weekend action. Number 22, Mississippi State at 17-7 at number 19, Ole Miss, who's 19-6. 6 o'clock on ESPN, I believe. It should be following the Alabama-Auburn game. Haslam has 76-71 Ole Miss, so we'll go Ole Miss minus 4.5, over under 146.5.
Also, Coyle, real quick, it wouldn't be, a beef podcast without me complaining about something with the TV. We have the biggest college basketball game in years on ESPN, but we have Duke Stanford on ABC Saturday at 4 o'clock. I think that's a joke. Sorry, had to at least say that real quick. But I'm going to go Ole Miss here, 77-70. I'm going to take Ole Miss minus 4.5. I'm going to go over 146.5. Talked about Mississippi State a couple times this year. I took them as a long shot. I wanted to they were 50-1. I'm like, let me put a couple bucks on them to win it all. Maybe getting a good cash out spot, once the tournament started. I think they proceeded to lose like 3 in a row, and now they're sitting at 5-6. I remember looking last weekend, Coil, down at your house. I think they were up to like 75-1. So definitely backfired. Not surprising. I'm not a good gambler, but Mississippi State, they had another, tough loss at home. You had who did they just play the other night? They played Kentucky at home.
Florida.
I do. There's so many ranked teams. I honestly forget because I was thinking about Bama playing at Texas the other night, but they had Florida at home and they just looked terrible. Like they seemed like they almost quit. Like they're showing there's like a clear delineation between like the top teams in the SEC and where they are at right now. Like they are in the middle to lower middle spot in the SEC. And while that's very good, they can, they'd be fine in a lot of other conferences. It's tough in a conference like this. You just get smoked at home by a very good Florida team. But now you got to go, and play Ole Miss on the road, and they're your biggest rival. They want to beat you. I just think this is a really tough spot. This would be like a schedule loss, Coil, kind of like you were saying, like a lot of spot games this weekend. This is another spot game for me. I'm going with Ole Miss, not a whole, a lot of breaking down the game. This is just I see Ole Miss at home, favored against Mississippi State after they just got embarrassed against Florida at home. I'm going to take Ole Miss.
Yeah, Mississippi State has definitely fallen off. I won't say fallen off a cliff yet, but definitely has fallen off as the season's gone on. And, things like that were going to happen. Like Vandy started out really hot. Oklahoma started out really hot. Georgia started out really hot. But once these teams have kind of gotten into the thick of SEC play, teams have started to separate. I think Ole Miss was probably closer to that tier that I just said of Mississippi State, Georgia, Vandy, Oklahoma than it is the Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee type tier. But I agree with you in terms of a spot play. I like Ole Miss to win, but I do think Mississippi State is not like I was talking about with Vandy, not at full desperation mode yet, but still at the time where it's like we're not at a lock. If we lose out our games, I don't know if we're for sure getting in. So a little bit of a desperation angle here from Mississippi State. I'll take them to cover the 4.5 in a rivalry game. But I do like Ole Miss to secure the outright win. I'll go 72-68 Ole Miss. So Mississippi State plus 4.5, under 146.5 there. All right, second to last game we got on Saturday, and then we got 3 games to break down on Sunday. Number 11, Michigan State at 19-5 at Illinois, who's 17-8. 8 o'clock tip on Fox. Illinois projected to win 79-72. So go Illinois minus 6.5, over under 150.5.
Yeah, I was spot on about Sparty a couple weeks ago. One, Coil, to your point, on Twitter, I forget that not everyone listening here probably is following you on Twitter or listening, so I have to mention I saw this on Twitter. You said that their really bad 3-point shooting is catching up with them, and I agree. Michigan State is like a bottom 20 team in the country. And that's including that's like the likes of Chicago State, like all those teams, like they are one of the worst teams in the country at shooting the 3. When you are playing in a power conference, when you are playing against these very good teams, you have to be able to shoot the ball. If you want to make a deep run in March Madness, you have to be able to shoot the ball. They cannot do that. Going to Illinois smells blood in the water. They are one of the only 9 or 8 teams, I think, that are top 20 and in the top 30 in Ken Palm offense and defense, respectively, for Illinois. I think they're going to win this game big. I have them winning 84-70. I'm going with the Illini minus 6.5 over 150.5. And Michigan State, you're going to see, when this next top 25 comes out, they're going to be like in the low teens, maybe even around like the high 20s. I think, Michigan State seed wise, I think they're still going to make the tournament no matter what, but they're at free fall like seed wise. They were, earlier a couple weeks ago, probably around like a 2-3. Now they're going to probably be sitting around like a 5-6, especially if this game goes the way I think it will.
Yeah, I watched that game against Indiana the other night and talking to Ben Kurt, who's a Michigan State fan, and I took the under in that game, and that one hit pretty easily. It was just basically, two teams that can't score from the outside. And the shooting has for sure caught up to Michigan State. They were able to get by with, talent at the beginning of the year, coaching, defense, all that good stuff. But, other teams have kind of caught on to it. And Ben Kurt was even saying, you throw a zone at them, you pack it in, they can't do anything. I think they're 14th worst, in the country, only shooting like 28.6%. So it's a team that can't really shoot. And the analytics, even though Illinois has had some doubt, bad hiccups tonight, some down moments throughout like kind of the middle of the year, the analytics still love them. You were kind of touching on it. I think right now at Haslam, he's got them like number 8 in the entire country. So they're not even ranked in the top 25, but it is a team like when they're playing really well, they have a really high ceiling. They just hit a bit of a rough spurt. I think Michigan State for sure is on a downward spiral. Do they get it turned around come March? Remains to be seen. But, shooting is one thing that you can't get better at, I think, during the season. I think from playing basketball my entire life, obviously never playing it at the level of Michigan State, Illinois, but shooting during the season is just like something that you do to just stay on kind of on cue. Like what you did in the off season, it's kind of just help maintain that. You're not going to become a better shooter as the season goes on. That is a whole off season type thing. So it's not like they can just go out there and teach these guys how to shoot. Can you teach guys defense, effort, how to rebound better, things like that? Sure. But I just don't think you're going to magically, if you're Michigan State, be able to start shooting the 3 ball at a high level. Maybe do they get hot? Maybe they get their confidence going. Who knows? But the numbers aren't lying right now with their shooting. I like Illinois to win this one, and I like them to win it comfortably too, 74-65. So Illinois minus 6.5, under 150.5 there. All right, final game on Saturday night. SEC action. Number 15, Kentucky at 17-7. Big time home win the other night against Tennessee. They traveled to Texas to play 15-10. Texas Longhorns, who is a bubble team for sure in their own right. Must-win spot, I think, here for Texas to give the committee some hope to their resume because they've been really struggling. 8 o'clock tip on ESPN. Kentucky projected to win this one barely, 79-78. So we'll go Kentucky minus 1.5, over under 156.5.
Yeah, Coyle, Texas is that perfect example of I was talking kind of the beginning of the show. We were talking about Vandy. They are 15-10 overall, and they are sitting at 4-8 in the SEC. And once again, the SEC is an unreal conference. I am not taking that away from the SEC. But it's tough for me to look at a team that is 4-8 in the conference, especially too when they're take it like Bama just smushed them. You know what I mean? And like their 4 wins in the SEC, they beat Oklahoma, they beat Mizzou and A&M, but they haven't beaten one of the top 3 dogs. Like they haven't beaten the top dogs. Auburn, they had them at home, they lost. They went to A&M, lost by 20. I know they beat A&M by a point at home. That was, like big rivalry game. But you're looking at the rest of the way, they have this game against Kentucky. Then after that, at South Carolina, that, isn't going to move the needle for the committee. At Arkansas is going to be the Bubble Bowl. Then you would get Georgia at home, at, Mississippi State at home against Oklahoma. Like, the home games you're getting aren't really great games. And then, the road games aren't, obviously at Mississippi State's going to be a big game, for them in terms of like getting an opportunity. But you're sitting here 15-10. This is a must-win game. You got Kentucky coming to town. Coyle, you and I always talk about this for these major conferences. There is that one team, whether they are good or bad, if they are coming to your town, that is going to be the biggest game of your season. Texas fans were used to a blue team that started with a K with Kansas. Now Kentucky's coming to town. This is a massive game. I think the crowd's going to be great. I'm actually going with Texas to win this game because if they don't win this game, they're going to have a very tough time, making this NCAA tournament. You know, Fox Sports, shout out Mike DeCourcy, looking at his bracketology stuff. He has them as one of the last 4 teams in. He has them playing SMU in the first 4, and they're hanging on by a thread. Like I said, you know, but you lose this game, you're 15-11, you're 4-9. Like, and you know, you can talk about the SEC all day, but 4-9 is a really ugly number to look at. And I don't know if that would be enough to get them in the NCAA tournament. So I'm going to go with Texas back against the wall play. Need a win. You know, that's need a win's an understatement. This is a must win game.
Yeah, spot play, I think, is the term of the episode this weekend. Also, it's like very reminiscent of last week. Like we had 2 upsets that we both really liked in Kansas State beating Kansas and then Clemson beating Duke, both the underdogs being at home. This week we both got Arizona against Houston, and I'm going with Texas as well. And that says a lot for me in this one because I've been off on this Texas team all year. I've faded them on numerous occasions and have cashed in more than not. I'm not a fan of them. If they make it to the tournament, I don't even think they'll make a run, but you said it best, Joe. Back against the wall, got to have a type game. I'm going to keep it simple there. And Kentucky has been a much different team on the road than they've been at home. So I like Texas to win this one as well. 80-75, Texas plus 1.5, over 156.5. I'll probably do what I did a few weeks ago and do like dog of the day of Arizona against Houston. And then as long as that wins, roll that over into Texas versus Kentucky at night. I think both those teams are live dogs for sure. And they were going to pull off the upset. So 80-75 Texas. I'll go Texas plus 1.5, over 156.5 there. Under 156.5 there for me. All right, we go to Sunday where we got 3 games. We got about 8 minutes to hit on them. We start with the game, rivalry week. We have Auburn, Alabama. We have Mississippi State, Ole Miss. And then Sunday we got number 20, Michigan at 19-5, traveling to Ohio State, who's 15-10. 1 o'clock tip on CBS. Very similar to that Texas-Kentucky game we just broke down. Ohio State projected to win 75-72, so we'll go Ohio State minus 2.5, over under 147.5.
Ohio State, you know, Coyle, we've talked about them off air, on air. They are one of the weirdest teams in the country this season. You know, they have a win against Texas, you know, but then they lose earlier in the year to Pitt. They lose to Maryland, but then they beat Kentucky by 20. Like, excuse me, I'm getting heck. Still one of the weirdest teams in the country for me. Sitting there at 15-10, 7-7 in the Big Ten. You know, tough loss at Nebraska, but then, you know, earlier that week they beat Maryland. I think they're going to beat Michigan at home. You know, stop me if you heard us say this before, but spot play, Ohio State needing a big one at home in a massive rivalry game. You know, Sunday, also stop me if I've said this before, first Sunday without football, 1 o'clock, CBS. You know, you're going to be hungover. Coyle, you guys are going to be crawling back from Sea Isle. You know, you're going to sit down on the couch when you get back home. You're going to throw this game on the TV. I think Ohio State's going to win 77-73. I'm going to take a minus 2.5. I'm going to go over 147.5. Got to have a game for the Buckeyes, and I think they're better than their record says they are. Like, because I know they have the potential to blow out a pretty good Kentucky team by 20 points. Like, that's in there. Like, they have the potential to be a really good team, but for whatever reason, they just haven't been able to put it together. But I think they get this one done.
Yeah, I'm going to fade the spot play in this one. I agree with you that it is a spot play, but I really believe in this Michigan team. I have a lot of faith in them. Their MO, I guess, this season has been that they play in a lot of close games, and they've been finding ways to win that. Does that come back to haunt them come March? We'll see, but I think they're just the better team than Ohio State in this one. As you said, Ohio State's so up and down. Like, I had Washington the other night. I think it might have even been last night, or 2 nights ago. Plus 9.5 against Ohio State. And Ohio State beat them by like 14 or 15 points. Like, they've been such a hard team to get a fingerprint on. And it's probably a game that I won't even bet, like unless, you know, maybe look at it live potentially. But you just don't know what Ohio State team you're going to get to show up. But for the sake of the show, I'm going to take Michigan to win 70-72, Michigan plus 2.5, and I will go over 147. All right, going to throw one of these in going forward as we get closer to March and we begin to talk about potential dark horse teams, potential Cinderella teams. Going to throw a mid-major game of the week as we did with our college football preview show where we do our group of 5 game of the week. This is our mid-major game of the week, and it goes to the Missouri Valley Conference. We got the Bradley-Drake matchup. Bradley at 20-6, at Drake 23-2. at Ryan Coyle 35 on Twitter. I tweeted about Drake yesterday, but really impressive. This is a team that has won, I think, 11 in a row now. They're only 2 losses this season. We're back to back, so they've had win streaks of 12 games to start the season and 11 games since that 2-game losing streak. 2 o'clock tip on ESPN. Drake projected to win 66-59 at home here. So we'll go Drake minus 6.5, over under 124.5, Joe.
Yeah, this is a Drake team, Coyle. I mean, like you said, 23-2. A lot of the bracketology people have them, like, if the tournament were to start today, obviously they're like the auto bid for that Missouri Valley, but they're ahead of where the bubble cutoff is. Like, they are like an 11. I saw a couple of places have them as high as a 10 seed, where you have that bubble cutoff as like a low 11, 12 seed. So this is a very good Drake Bulldog team. I really hope that, they make the tournament, whether they win the Missouri Valley or not. But this is a team that is holding they have a win over Vanderbilt and they have a win over Kansas State. That Kansas State win is starting to look better and better every single day. That is a massive win for them to have in their back pocket as the season goes on. This is a very good Bradley team, though, as well. This game, Coy, like you said, on ESPN2. But I am going to go with the Drake Bulldogs here, 67-64. I think Bradley keeps it within the number 6.5. I'm going to go over 124.5. Another, this is a very good opportunity for Drake to kind of showcase who they are to the country. You know what I mean? Nationally broadcast game, not as many games on Sunday. So, if you got a second TV, maybe you're watching, the rest of the Ohio State Michigan game, you throw this game on the second TV. I think it's going to be a very good basketball game. I'm going to go with the Drake Bulldogs here.
I'm going to go Drake as well. A team that I've watched a few times. Pretty cool story. Like their coach comes from D2. Won multiple national championships at the D2 level, brings a lot of the D2 guys with them. It seems like they don't miss a beat. Drake still has in the back of my head, a little bit of anger towards them for what they did to us in that Washington State game in the tournament last year. But they've been a cool team to watch. And I don't know if I could get myself to root for them in March Madness again after that collapse they had last year, but it's a completely different squad than before. So maybe, and I've always had I kind of like this team. They're one of the mid-major schools that I always am rooting for kind of on the side, but I like them to win. And I think they're going to win this game pretty comfortably. One thing I do notice with them a lot when I'm just looking at spreads for games, they always have a pretty low total. So this is a really good defensive team as we, project here, or Haslam projects a 66-59 win, but they can also score the ball as well. It's a fun kind of team that shares the ball and shoots the ball from 3 really, really well. But I'll go Drake to win comfortably, 72-60. So Drake minus 6.5, over 124.5. In our final game, 2 teams coming off tough losses, games where they probably both should have actually won, and they both lose. So a big spot for both teams. St. John's, especially as they look to maintain their lead in the Big East. But number 24, Creighton, 18-7, goes to New York to play number 9, St. John's, who's 21-4. 3 o'clock tip on FS1. St. John's projected to win 72-69. So St. John's minus 2.5, over under 141.5. 1 minute, Joe. Quick hitter here. What do you got?
I'm going to go with the Johnnies here, 65-64. I'll take Creighton plus 2.5. I'm going to go under 141.5. Feels like this is going to be a defensive struggle. St. John's really needs a win. I mean, both these teams, if they want to keep up for that 1 seed in the Big East tournament, need a big win here. Both top 2 teams in the Big East, but I'm going with St. John's at home.
I'm going to go with St. John's as well. 2 teams that, I was at the St. John's Nova game last night. As we said, I bet on St. John's. I really liked Creighton at home the other night against UConn. And it feels like UConn, when you least expect them to show up and do something, Joe, that I feel like that's the theme of that team this year. Like that Marquette game, no one expected them to win that one. Everyone expected them to beat St. John's at home. They lose that game. They blow a big lead. And then last night, or the other night, UConn goes to Creighton and win. Like, UConn's been so unpredictable as well. But this conversation isn't about them. But I do like St. John's to bounce back at home. Not a gotta have it game for either team, but coming off, both hard losses with Creighton against UConn and St. John's down to the wire loss against Villanova. Be a good feeling inside that locker room for one of these teams, obviously, to get back on the right side and get a win after 2 tough losses. But I'm going to side with the home team there in a spot play as well. 74-70 St. John's. St. John's minus 2.5, over 141.5, and that'll do it, hitting right at the 40-minute marker. big time college basketball weekend, first weekend without football. Lock in, enjoy it. We will be back next week, Joe. We'll start to break down a little bit of bracketology as well as we get closer, talk about some seeding, talk about some bubble action. But thank you, everyone, for listening. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, follow us on socials at FoxPHL Gambler. And we'll be back talking to you next week. Enjoy the basketball this weekend, everybody.